My name is Beth Peterson. I'm the chair of the nursing department at Bethel University, and I would like to welcome you to the 15th annual Bethel University Nursing Research in Practice Symposium. Excuse me. Our topic for this evening is coping with the challenges of professional nursing. In addition to the Bethel nursing students who will be presenting posters, we are pleased to have nursing students from Gustavus Adolphus College and the Minnesota School of Business, and they'll be joining us as well, presenting their posters. Some of you who are regular attenders at this symposium may notice that we have a few less posters this year. This is because due to schedule changes, a number of our degree completion students were unable to present their posters tonight. We're working to address this issue, and we anticipate that our degree completion students will be back presenting their posters next year. We would also like to express appreciation to our sponsors, the Minnesota Nurses Association Foundation, the Chi at Large chapter of Sigma Theta Tau, and ACR Homes. A number of just announcements and housekeeping kind of things that I'd like to go over, and then we'll get to our speaker. Just to give you an overview of what's going to happen tonight, we're obviously in here with the keynote presentation by Dr. Tiffany till about 6 o'clock. And then from 6 to 7:30, we'll move to the Robertson Center gym for an interactive poster presentation. You'll also have the opportunity at that time to meet with healthcare agency vendors and have light refreshments. At 7:40, the concurrent sessions will begin. There are a number of topics which you will see in the program that you received. You can select the session that you want to attend, and topics and room locations are in that handout, so you can look at that. And then finally at 8:40, we'll meet back in the gym for the announcement of poster session winners and the vendor prize drawing. If you need assistance finding your way down any of the halls or to any of the locations, there are a number of students around that have a student host name tag on them, and they would be happy to help you find your way. I wanted to call your attention to a couple of things in the packet that you received. First of all, on one of the middle pages, or several of the middle pages, there is a list of all the poster presentations. If you want to see or want to make sure that you see some specific posters, you might try to use that. That might help you to plan your evening. So they're all listed in there, and that might give you an idea of where you want to start. Secondly, in the handout, the very back page is, the title of it is Prize Drawing Participation Form. I wanted to just explain that to you. Bethel students are expected to take this form with them to each of the vendors in the RC gym and ask the vendors to initial it or stamp it. They'll have some way of marking it. The students from other schools are welcome to do this as well, to talk to the vendors and then to ask them to stamp it. Then all students who have a mark from a vendor, mark from the vendors, are eligible for the prize drawing at 8:40. Simply tear off that one sheet of paper, leave it at the registration desk when you move to your concurrent session, and then back at 8:40 in the gym we'll draw names and you might be eligible for a prize. You do need to be present to win. The third thing is that Dr. Pamela Irwin, who is scheduled to give a presentation or a concurrent session on nursing from a patient's perspective, is unable to be here tonight. And so instead, the concurrent session, Men in Nursing, Joys and Challenges, will be held in the underground instead. So if you want to hear Men in Nursing Challenges, move to the underground. If you are interested in receiving CEUs for the symposium and indicated that when you registered, you don't need to do anything. The CEU material will be sent to you by email. If you didn't indicate that you wanted CEUs, but in fact you do, please stop at the registration table to find out how to arrange for that. We'll be glad to send that to you. And then finally, because we are talking about the challenges of professional nursing, we decided that it might be a good idea to do something to help to relieve the stress that we experience with those challenges. Consequently, we invited Gloria Matusik, she's a certified massage therapist and a friend of the nursing department, to join us tonight to provide complimentary mini therapeutic massages. You will find her to the right of the main doors in the RC gym when you go in there for the poster presentations. And I think you'll just line up and take advantage of that. That taken care of, now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Jone Tiffany is an associate professor of nursing at Bethel University, where she has been a faculty member with a brief interruption since 2001. She received a diploma in nursing from Mounds Midway School of Nursing, a bachelor's degree in human services from Metropolitan State University, a bachelor's degree in nursing, and a master's degree in counseling psychology from Bethel University, and a master's degree and a doctorate of nursing practice from St. Catherine University. Does that sound like a professional student to you? She has worked as a head nurse, a staff nurse, a case manager, and a clinical nurse educator in pediatrics, obstetrics, and psychiatry. She has been a health information technology HITS scholar through the National League for Nursing and is involved in ongoing research regarding simulation debriefing, the use of Second Life virtual clinicals, and she's been involved in the development of case studies for a number of the vSim simulations produced by the National League for Nursing. She is also a member of the Health East Care System Board of Directors and is chair of their Quality of Care Committee. She is known as an enthusiastic, supportive, and knowledgeable teacher and colleague who makes time spent with her enjoyable, stimulating, and often full of laughter. Jone is the mother of 2 adult children and the wife of one husband, Hal, who I believe shares her willingly with all of us. Please join me in welcoming Jone.
Thank you, Beth, for that. And as you can tell, I'm a bit of a gnat and go around here and there and try this and try that. And I really do love to learn, and I love to teach because I love to learn. And so welcome tonight to the symposium. And is everybody doing okay out there? You people way in the back over there? You can see still back there? All right. We've had this is our second computer for the night, so hopefully it'll work here for us. And, technology and computer issues are always on the forefront, and I kind of enjoy tinkering, so I didn't have to fix it this time, though. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about, I'm going to give a talk about the challenges out there in the professional world of nursing, and also I'm going to talk about what do we do about those? And how do we thrive and remain positive in this difficult world where there's a lot of chaos going on? Here's the objectives, and I hope that you walk away tonight with some ideas of how you can frame your nursing career positively and how you can remain engaged in the nursing profession without getting burnt out along the way. So these are my objectives. And I'm going to start with framing a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about challenges first, and then we'll go into some of the solutions that we might find. I've done a survey of nurses, and I've also done a survey of nurse managers. So I will share with you the information that isn't surprising, and it actually mirrors what's in the literature, so it's kind of neat. So, what do some of the nursing surveys report out there that you can find when you look in the research articles? So this is interesting, as you can see up there, the American Nursing Association reported that 74% of RNs listed stress and being overworked above being worried about getting an infection or being injured or assaulted. So that's kind of surprising, I think, somewhat surprising results. In a Nursing Outlook article in 2013, people reported, this was a nurse report as well, poor eating habits, irregular sleeping patterns, rotating shifts, all these issues made it a little bit difficult and made the world of nursing a little bit stressful. But one of the biggest issues that I see with nursing is really about, it's kind of a piece of a puzzle, and it's really about how each individual is different. All of us process things differently. We could have 2 nurses side by side, and each one of them will react differently to what happens to them and what the scenarios are. So that makes it really challenging to have all these people working in nursing and you're side by side with someone else who may either underreact from what you react or overreact or just see things differently. So stress management really needs to begin with kind of a personal assessment of how we handle that stress. It's important to know how you cope with stress. So each of us need to kind of look inside and say, how do I cope when I'm in a stressful situation? Because nursing is, you're on the forefront, and there's a lot of stress that goes along with taking care of patients dying. Even if you're in an area where there's a lot of happiness and wellness, there are still stress and issues that happen. I like how Marilyn Chambers always sets aside time to talk with students in her mental health clinical about their favorite dysfunctional coping mechanisms. And so she spends a lot of time when she goes around the room, and each person weighs in and says, yeah, you know what, this is what I do. I avoid. I avoid things, and then maybe they go away, maybe they don't. I figured out as I was preparing for this talk, my favorite coping mechanism is procrastination. So again, here we go again. It talks about shift work. And this is actually, again, a report from the literature about how these are things that cause a lot of stress in nursing. So we've got sleep disturbances, illness, disturbed circadian rhythms, and then isolation from family. And so these things are all kind of reported by nurses that they can disrupt and add stress to the life of being a nurse. And then there's the inadequate staffing patterns. So there might be a lack of nurses who are seasoned nurses or experienced nurses on the night shift. There may be a high attrition rate. Maybe you have a whole bunch of new grads or a lot of new nurses to the unit. Or maybe there's illnesses, or maybe you're just short-staffed, period, and you get, we always used to say the bus unloaded. We'd have these calls, or people would come in one after the other, and we'd like, well, what happened? It's like the bus unloaded down in the ER, and out came 10 patients. So we have to really look at these things that really kind of are out of our control a little bit, but we do control how we react to them. Are we going to, let them take us down and react to them that way, or are we going to try to figure out how we can solve these problems? So burnout is another word that is used in nursing, and Susan Simmons, in her article titled Striving for Life Balance, she describes burnout as the state of continual physical and mental exhaustion, being disconnected from work and home because you don't have enough energy for either. And so dissatisfaction in the workplace, exhaustion, being disconnected, and a frequent complaint in the nursing profession is that, when we do something good, nobody cares anyways. And so how do we reframe that? How can we stop playing that victim-type role and actually take control of that? And I'll give you some examples of things that have worked for me and that the staff nurses that I surveyed reported that worked for them. So also in her article was interesting. She discussed a new personality type that's showing up in healthcare, and she called it type D. And it really talked about distress, people who are distressed. And it's negativity, pessimism, depression, and anxiety. So those things are showing up in the healthcare settings. And so she said that she called it kind of a type D personality. And then she discussed the autotelic personality, which is really kind of developing a go-with-the-flow kind of attitude, being flexible, and in being able to enjoy life and enjoying your downtime and your leisure time without feeling stressed about that you're not working or that you have to pick up another shift or that you're grading another paper. Some of us have a little bit harder time relaxing and putting the work away than others, but it's a good learning, and it's really good to spend time trying to do that and building in that relaxation because it's worth the effort. So those of you who are practicing nurses have heard this phrase, nurses eat their young. Some of you students may have not heard this phrase, In my opinion, it's kind of a vile expression that implies most experienced nurses don't treat newer nurses very well. And so anytime anybody would bring it up when I was in my work setting, I would say, I don't do that. Do you? And of course, what do you think the answer was? Well, no, not me. No, I've never done that. And oh, I wouldn't do that, but there are people that do. So that was always the response. But it kind of got people thinking that, why do we say these words that, nurses eat their young? So personally, when we're connected on Facebook with our grads and we hear stories, people email, ask for references and such, I hear more good reports than bad reports from our students, from our graduates. But it's a popular phrase nonetheless, and you'll see it and you'll hear it out in the workplace. So I'm going to show you a real short video here from a younger nurse that's had some issues from her nursing career to kind of set the stage for the rest of the talk. It gives you a sense of kind of what's out there in the media. And after this, we'll kind of discuss the so whats and how can we counteract this and combat this, what's out there in the media.
Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse, and in today's segment I'm going to discuss with you why nurses eat their young. This is going to be a very charged video, and in keeping with usual fashion, I'm not going to mince words. Mainly because this is a significant workplace violence issue. Yes, I did say violence, and it is occurring in the workplace. That might sound kind of inflammatory at first. Violence, how can nurses eating their young be violence? Well, let's define violence first. Violence is using force to exert your will upon another human being without their consent. Okay. Can violence then be brought on by psychological means? Oh yes. Oh yes. So we're going to discuss today why it is that nurses eat their young. Mainly because if you are a nurse, or you know a nurse, or you are an underling of a nurse, I hate that word, but it tends to be used, you have experience with this. You have experience with this. And we're going to talk about it because it is important and because it is not getting any better. And I can guarantee you that with the changes in healthcare that are coming in this country, it will definitely not get any better unless we proactively do something about it. So let's discuss how many reasons do I have here? Four reasons why nurses eat their young. The first is powerlessness. And what I'm going to do is enumerate them first, and then we're going to go back and expand upon them. The first is powerlessness. The second is the medical culture of hierarchical bullying. That's a mouthful, but it's true. The third is that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And the fourth is anger of life circumstances. All right, let's try. If you are a human being that has a soul, there is a sense of, oh my gosh, if I'm going to give good care to these people, I'm going to be stretched thin, but I'm going to do the best I can. A human being can only be put in a situation of powerlessness and helplessness for so long. That powerlessness is fostered and is bred by many circumstances in our healthcare system right now. I would submit that it is first begun and actively indoctrinated in nursing schools. Ooh, I'm stepping on some toes right now. For those of you who have been through nursing school, it is a common complaint and it is a commonly held experience that the nursing instructors in many cases have unreasonable expectations. The workload, the reading load that is put upon our nurses in nursing school is impossible to measure up to, and yes, it is. There is no way that one person can read 200 pages divided amongst 5 classes in one night and still expect to sleep, cook food for their family, and have some semblance of a social life. It is unbalanced, and that imbalance creates a feeling of powerlessness.
All right, enough of her, huh? No. I think it's interesting to go out on YouTube and go out on nursing sites and hear about this. Yes, there's issues. Yes, there's stress. But I think if we frame it this way negatively and frame it, dramatically, it doesn't help. It doesn't help our profession, and it doesn't help our cause. And it certainly doesn't help take care of patients. So if we look at this, and all I can say is, wow, it's a complex environment. But don't worry, we're not going to stay here and talk about the issues all night. We're going to talk about some solutions, because that's my favorite thing to do and my favorite place to go. So just very complex. This part of the talk is a little bit like Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Present. And so we're kind of starting there, and we're going to move out from that. So in her book, Nursing from Within, A Fresh Approach to Putting Out Fires and Self-Care Workarounds, Elizabeth Scala takes on chronic dissatisfaction that some nurses experience at different times in their careers. With change rapidly dominating us, and the landscape of healthcare is very, very complicated, and now with the new Affordable Care Act, it's changing again. And so nurses are stretched at times to their breaking point. So she talks a lot about how nursing has come a long way in scientific skills, in some ways in critical thinking, kind of clinical reasoning type of skills. We haven't necessarily moved forward as a group, nurses. And so she talks about the funnel of nursing limitation. So we kind of put ourselves into this funnel, and what our output is can only be so much because we're kind of stuck in that funnel and we have a small ability to output. So I thought it's actually a really interesting book. So where does this negativity come from? Where does this come from? Well, the behaviors may begin early on in a bully kind of person's life. We hear about it all the time in elementary school, in junior high, middle school, and a lot of times it perpetuates as they get older, and then if they get into a power kind of differential, then they use that power in a way that is hurtful, and they get their own power out of doing that. So it's a little bit like the Sneetches from Dr. Seuss. But because they had stars, all the starbelly Sneetches would brag we're the best kind of Sneetches on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with those plain belly sorts. You only could play if your belly's in stars, and the plain belly children had none on theirs. So it's a little bit like Dr. Seuss talked about in his book, about how here's the Sneetches with stars on their belly, and they're preferential, and they have more power. And then there's the Sneetches without. Let's take Dorothy for an example. She is so stressed out, right? She's caught in a tornado. She woke up from the tornado in a strange land. She only has her dog with her. Where's Auntie Em? She's at home. She's not with her. And so, and worst of all, her dress doesn't match her ruby slippers. That's one of the worst things. I'm just like red like my little ribbon here. So she comes upon a fork in the road. Which path will she choose? The scarecrow is pointing, go down this path, and tells her that that's where the Wizard of Oz lives, in Emerald City. And she kind of looks puzzled. Well, what about this road? I don't know where this road leads. So which path are you going to choose for your nursing career, for your future, and your present time for many of you? The path to a positive, balanced outlook that will help you thrive as a nurse, or a path of stress and burnout and defeat? Just like you choose. It's your choice, just like Dorothy did. So how do we learn to work together, the Sneetches with the stars and the Sneetches without? How do we work together to build this positive work environment amidst all the negativity and stress out there? How can we be different kinds of Sneetches that actually see each other's potential and that work together as a team to take care of the patient? Because that's why we all are nurses. It's that patient, that client, on the end, the family, on the end. That's who we want to affect. That's who we want to help become the best and the wellness, the highest level of wellness they can achieve. So I'm going to frame this next part from a positive lens, through a positive lens, because that's how I choose to navigate the very busy healthcare world. And that's how I have worked my entire career, is through that positive lens. Now I have a disclaimer to make. My number one strength on the Strength Finders inventory is, guess, positivity. Sorry. I just took that last year, so I never knew that my whole life. And so pretty interesting. You should all take it. It's actually a fascinating test. So again, One of my favorite cartoons, an optimist, someone who figures that taking a step backward and taking a step forward is not a disaster, it's a cha-cha. And so that's kind of what we did today as we were trying to set up the computer, and an hour later we got it to work. So I'm one of those people that refuses to dwell on the negative because it doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't help you. Those ruminations in your head over and over about what's happened, put it aside, look to the future. And, we have to pay attention to some of it, but we don't have to obsess and dwell on it. When I was a nurse manager on a very busy unit that had postpartum, labor and delivery, pediatrics, and nursery, I had 2 rules. And the first rule was, if you have a problem with another person and you're going to bring it to me, you need to be willing to meet with me, that person, and you, yourself, to talk about the issue and to come up with a resolution. People didn't like that. The number of complaints went down exponentially. They're like, what? I can't just complain about them? You're going to make me talk to them? I have to sit with them in the same room, face to face? So that was rule number 1, and it was great. It worked great. And people would come in and they'd look at me and I'd be like, and they'd turn around and go back out. It's like, nope, I don't have enough courage. I can't do that. The second one was, if you're going to bring a problem or issue to me, I'm not going to listen until you bring a solution. So you can bring the problem to me, but you had to bring a solution with you as well. And again, that cut way down until the culture started changing and people realized, you know what, this is my unit. And these are my colleagues, and we need to learn to work together, and we need to learn how to talk to one another. And you know what? I should have a solution to the issue, or at least try. I didn't expect them to solve the problem, but I wanted to hear what their thoughts were, because they were the boots on the ground. They were the ones that were working. And the other thing that I always said to people is, don't allow people to live rent-free in your head. Don't dwell on that kind of thing. Don't let them get into your head and make you feel negative about things. Just kind of put that aside. So if you allow that, then they're kind of living in your head without paying to be there. So these next 2 slides I really kind of like. They go together. So do we ever really know which mark we make that will matter the most? Extraordinary things happen nowhere else but in every day, and today can always be the beginning. And every day with every word, we get to decide. So it's our choice. Do we mar the world or do we mark it? We can make that choice. We make the choice on what our environment of care is going to be like. What is it going to look like? How are we going to interact with the people who we work with in our workplace? So what are the skills, the knowledge, the attitudes out there that nurse managers, directors, people in all different areas of care, in the community, and home care, and hospice, in the hospital, what are they looking for? What are these knowledge, skills, and attitudes that they're looking for? And I think we make do a pretty good job of skills and knowledge in nursing school, but I'm not quite so sure about the attitude piece. I know, we have UBIs and all that stuff to kind of reframe positively what goes on, but I just don't know if we're quite there yet about attitudes, forging forward. So I sent a quick email survey to some of the nurse managers in Minnesota, and I'm going to share the overall themes that came back from the Survey Monkey. It was just a quick Survey Monkey, and I got 50 responses. So I was really shocked that I got responses so quickly. Some of the top traits that they say will help nurses navigate through this complex world of healthcare. Number 1, ability to think. They want people to be able to think and process through and be able to say, oh, I see this, that must mean this, or at least start the process of thinking. When you're a new nurse, you don't have as many experiences, but can you think through an experience that you've had, just kind of like we do in our debriefing for simulation? How do we apply it to another situation then, the situation that we're talking about and learning about? And then these are the other ones, the other top ones that they listed. So we've got work in interprofessional teams, positive attitude, flexible. They want you to be, because the healthcare world is kind of flexing and constantly. Healthy, mind, body, and spirit. That was a big one. Almost everybody said that. We want people to be, to have some kind of balance and to be healthy, and they all mentioned the spirit piece of it as well. Resilient, assertive, where you're able to address or take on the issues without just running to the manager. And then take responsibility for actions. Don't blame others when something goes wrong. That, you take that responsibility. So I'm going to skip through that video. I can put it up for the students if you want to see it. It's actually just an excerpt from a talk by Kathleen Bartholomew. She's a nurse leader, and it's actually out on YouTube if you're interested in watching it. It's just like a minute long. She's a national speaker, and she's actually the wife of John Nance, the pilot that's written many books about healthcare. And she just talks about the things that I'm talking about and reframing positively. She started working on a unit, and it was kind of a toxic environment, and she quickly helped change that and move it around. Oops, sorry. So how do we do these kind of things? How do we make changes in healthcare? How do we move forward? I also collected data from several practicing nurses. I sent another Survey Monkey out throughout the Twin Cities in a variety of roles, community health, acute care, and asked them 2 questions. How do you thrive as a nurse in the current healthcare environment? And what do you use to help you cope? And so I'll report on these. The interesting thing was, these are the same strategies I found in the literature, and they're same strategies that I've used throughout my career. So the themes were there, and so it was kind of nice to hear that other people thought the same and really reflected what was in the literature. Now, I know there's 2.4 million nurses out there, and so this is a small sample size, but it really does mirror the literature. So it was, I figured it actually is really important. So how do we get there? How do we thrive as nurses and just not survive out there? The first concept is mindfulness. Caring for patients can be that organized chaos. So mindfulness is really about focusing on the moment and being calm and kind of listening and taking a breather when you're in the middle of chaos. I know that sounds strange to be able to do that, but it does really help. And in all the literature, it talks about how mindfulness really decreases burnout. So I actually took a mindfulness course when I was first a new nurse manager, or when I first started in labor and delivery, I guess it was. And about a week after I took the mindfulness course, we did a lot of paying attention to breathing, stopping in the middle of chaos and just taking some deep breaths and kind of centering ourselves. So I had 2 women in labor at the same time that all of a sudden went to delivery. And I looked like a ping pong ball, back and forth and in and out of the rooms, and I wasn't thinking like, I need help. I was just trying to manage it. So I thought about my mindfulness class that I had taken. I stopped, I took some deep breaths, and I just stood there for a minute, and then it's like calm came over me, and I realized, you know what, you have to find some more help to take care of one of these patients because you can't be in both rooms at once. And I found it really helpful. It was helpful techniques to learn. And I know at some of the local hospitals, they actually offer some mindfulness classes that help nurses kind of stop and center themselves and take a little bit of a break. We also call it situational awareness, if you've ever heard that. And really, it's being aware of the situation you're in and being able to think instead of being reactive and drawn into the chaos. So if you're situationally aware of what's going on, then you can actually calmly kind of get extra help and move through the process. So that situational awareness is a big piece. The next thing was spirituality, and I'm kind of preaching to the choir on this one, but it came up over and over and over with the responses from the nurses. So how does centering ourselves spiritually help? How does that help us thrive in our nursing career? Most nurses, enter the nursing field to help people, right? To help people become as well as possible, to increase that wellness. Well, several of nurses in the survey actually said when they get really stressed out, they actually pray. They pray, they ask God for help, and they ask God for a peace of mind and presence. And in an article in the Journal of Christian Nursing from March 2010, a study reported that 58 of the 58 nurses surveyed, 75% stated spirituality, praying, and spiritual-based resources help them cope with dying and ill patients. And so it's out there all over the literature how important being connected spiritually is to well-being and to not having this burnout that some people end up with in nursing. And so it's really, really important. It's been very important in my career as I've taken care of patients and family members and people who are dying or people who are having other health issues. So I love this term. I think it's, of course, I'm a gardener, so I love kind of garden metaphors. But the literature, there were several authors, actually, that use this word, soul drought. And Carol Jone was one of them, and she discussed the notion of soul drought instead of calling it burnout. She liked to use the word soul drought instead because it really was the reason why she was feeling burnt out. So she wanted to name it that. So being alive, in the 21st century is no easy task, right? We've got everything going on. We have all these distractions. So how do we avoid this soul drought? Sometimes I think, this is kind of crazy. You've got one part of the United States that's flooded, one part that has a drought. Why can't we just build a pipeline and get the water from one place to the next? It seems like a logical thing that, this is crazy. These people are in this predicament and those people are in that predicament. So like that, if there's an area of your life that feels like it's unbalanced or you have a drought, so and again, for you students, where you feel like it's just all school, for some of us, it's work. So what are those other parts of our life? And sometimes I think we do a little bit of a disservice and we don't talk enough about it, especially in nursing school. Talk enough about, are you taking care of yourself? I know we keep you really, really busy and we put you through the grinder. Same with nurses when you're working on the units. Are you picking up too much overtime and you have this soul drought that you're not connected to? So if you notice an aspect of your life that's parched for attention or energy, then, kind of build in your head this metaphoric kind of pipeline. So from one thing to the next, and see if you can kind of end up balancing that off a little bit so that you don't have this soul drought. What can you do in the areas of your life where there's drought? How can you water them and nurture them and, make them thrive and come back to life? And so many of the nurses surveyed talked about how good it felt when they went to church, when they joined a Bible study, or they just made sure that they kept their relationship with God front and center. Another theme that came through was a sense of calling. So a lot of nurses talked about that they felt called to nursing, that they had a sense of calling. In a recent study, nurses who went into nursing with a sense of calling actually were 35% more satisfied than those who went into nursing for a paycheck or just for a job. If they felt that sense of calling, their burnout rate was way less. So I thought that was a really interesting study. I certainly experienced this. I didn't know what I was going to do. I changed my major 3 times. As you can tell, I like school. And one day I started working at the university hospital as a station secretary, and there was a medical resident there, and he happened to be a Christian, and he said to me, "So, what do you want to do with your life?" I'm like, "I don't know. I like to help people. I don't know what I want to do." And he said, "You should be a nurse. We need nurses like you." And so it was like, wow. So I believe God put him there in my life to help me kind of see that this was my calling. I applied to nursing school the next week and never looked back 32 years ago. And it's been a great career. So that medical resident really gave me a gift, I think, and really helped me realize that I was called to this. So William Patrick, in his book called The Call of Nursing, 2013, he tells a story of a nurse who worked on an OB unit, mostly high risk, multiple pregnancies, lots of loss. In the nurse's story, she told many difficult situations and ethical issues and when patients made poor choices, and it was difficult for her. So she, however, because of her Christian faith and sense of calling, felt that she could really make a difference with these people. And she loved taking care of the difficult patients, difficult, quote unquote. She talked of praying for them and around them, and she discussed how important her Christian nursing education had been in the formation of her spirituality. Also, many students write about a sense of calling in their admission essays that they write. Talk about how they, since they were little, or they feel this sense of call that God has called them to nursing. There was a recent Facebook post from, actually, she was a recent graduate of ours that just really caught my eye, and just a couple days ago. And she said, on the Facebook post, she said, I want to share with you an encounter I had with another nurse who clearly does not feel the same way as I do about being called to the profession of nursing. So she starts by saying, last evening at work, I had another nurse tell me I regret going to nursing school and becoming a nurse. We work weird hours, have to work holidays, and it seems like all we do is push medications on people with an increasing number who are obese and have chronic health concerns. If I had known this a couple years ago, I wouldn't have gone to nursing school. And if I ever have kids, I'm going to strongly encourage them to not become nurses. So this was her response. Yes, nursing is that, but it is so much more than what was listed above. Nursing is talking a client down from a panic attack after his ventilator fails on him. Nursing is holding the hand of a patient in severe pain. It's providing comfort and dignity to a client that is dying, all the while fighting the tears from spilling from your eyes. Nursing is gently reminding the confused elderly patient, yet again, that they are in the hospital, they are safe, and their family loves them. Nursing is my career, my calling. And if I had to do it all over again and deal with the same stress of nursing school, the long nights of studying, and the wee hours of clinical, the countless papers preparing for NCLEX, I'd still become a nurse. In other words, I'm proud to be a nurse. It's my calling. So it just really resonated with me that, and she's a new nurse. She's a pretty new nurse out there. And so she said, I feel called. This is my calling. And so therefore, this is the way I am going to be a nurse. And this is how I'm going to care for patients. Because God's writing your story, he never leaves you alone. And his perfect love absorbs all your fear, and his perfect grace carries all your burdens. Your story is a happily ever after because Christ bought you happily ever after, so you always know how the story is going to end. You are going to be okay. Maintaining balance, that was another big theme. And so they talked about balance versus burnout, and many of the nurses said, you know what? It's my choice. I choose whether I am going to get up in the morning and go to work and be a grump and get caught up in negativity, or I choose that I'm going to go to work and do what I was called to do. And so they talked a lot about that, how making that choice really decreased their feelings of burnout. Another key thing was empowerment. So if you talk about if there's empowered employees in an organization, then when the leader's done with their work, the people will say, we did it ourselves. We did it all by ourselves. And look at what a good outcome there's been. Building that culture of good catches and near misses, they call them. So it's building that culture that people are able to report things that aren't right in a system, instead of just sitting back until we have a poor outcome. You see something that isn't working right, and you report it right away. So that's called a good catch. And then a near miss is when you have close to having a bad event. So it really empowers nurses. Good kind of healthcare companies, healthcare sites, really empower their nurses to be able to go out and make those decisions. I attended actually a leader interview this morning for a local health system joint commission survey as a board member, so I got to sit in on that. The entire focus of the meeting was creating a highly reliable organization where staff feel empowered and allowed to report these issues that I talked about. I like to use the term normalization of deviance. I think that's a big thing what happens in our healthcare world. If you have if you're working in a sort of a toxic environment where people are allowed to be bullies or people are allowed to say things to people that are hurtful or not give the best care possible, it becomes normal. So it becomes a normal culture over time. And so I like to call that normalization of deviance. And you don't even know that it's not a good environment because you're in it all the time. And so it's really important. So over time, it becomes kind of a new normal. And the highly reliable organizations that Joint Commission is really talking about do not allow this to happen because the staff is empowered to actually report these deviations before they become normal. Using your gifts. What are your gifts? Have you ever paid attention to that? Kind of did a little gift inventory for yourself? What am I good at? What kind of things do I do that are helpful to people? Do you make wise use of them? Sometimes some of us can get in trouble for our gifts if we have the gift of help, right? It's like, oh, I'll help you, and I'll help you, and I'll help you. And then we can tend to go down that road of burnout. So we have to be careful with some of our gifts as well. Each person is made up with different gifts. So we need to figure out in the healthcare world how to work together so these gifts kind of jive and that we have a good working relationship. This is an example of a nurse who actually uses his gifts.
When I became a nurse, and I'm passing on medications and getting things ready for my patients, I'd be in the hallways singing. Nobody really thought about it. I didn't really think about it. And the patients would start coming out and listening, and I started kind of realizing that this is something that I can use to personalize somebody's care, to be able to touch them a little bit.
He has a beautiful, soothing voice, and the nice thing about it is, when he looks at you, you know he's singing to you, and it just pierces my heart.
And time after time, you'll hear me say that I'm so lucky to be loving you. I mean, it's easy to turn on the TV and walk away, but it's personal. If you can sit down, talk with them, sing with them, tell them some jokes, do something just to keep their mind off of the pain while the medication's kicking in. Even if somebody's having a bad day, if you can make them feel just a little good about it, you can change the day. You'll see people request less pain medication because they have less pain. You'll see less mood stabilizers being used because they're usually in a higher spirits. They may not necessarily be happy about the situation, but it seems a little bit easier to handle. It may seem a little easier to manage. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places.
So that's a really sweet video, and I think I've watched it about 20 times, and each time I'm like, get the tissue. And because he's just really, he's using his gifts. He's using the gifts that God has given him. I watched another video that he actually did, and he's a Christian, so it was kind of neat. He felt that this was kind of his calling, and he was using his gifts to help people feel less pain and less problems. Okay, so humor. You got to use some humor, right? It has to be the right kind of humor and in the right place. We can't use it all the time, or we may get in trouble. We have to self-modulate a little bit, and, So many years ago, I like to tell a story. I was a new nurse manager on a big OB floor, and I got a page from the labor and delivery nurses, and it said 911, and that's what they did when they had a crisis. So I went running up there, and they're all running around in circles. They're not being very mindful of what's going on. People aren't pausing and figuring out, what do we need to do, who needs to do it? And so I thought, with my little wicked sense of humor, that I was going to do something to kind of jar them a little bit. So I started opening cupboards and opening drawers. And so I did that for a little bit, and they're all staring at me like, what are you doing? You know, we're falling apart here. What are you doing? So I did it for quite a while. And so finally, I closed the last cabinet door, and I looked at them, and I said, hey, who took that last blow-up nurse? You know, because they were asking for a nurse, and I'd already called everybody, and there was nobody to come. So instead of trying to find a nurse, so I said, there must be one in the cupboard here somewhere, right, that we can blow up and put out there so they can take care of a patient. So instead of thinking out of the box of how we could do that, so everybody laughed and the tension was relieved, and then we got in a huddle and we talked about, okay, so what needs to be done? And how are we going to get it done and done safely? And we ended up having a great shift. I threw on some scrubs, and we all worked together. There were some people who had less of a load. And so it really just took kind of the tension down a little bit temporarily so that we could actually think and be mindful of the situation. So this is one of my favorite signs. My mom gave this to me when I graduated, or when I started a job, actually, as a teacher. And so she always said, you know, if you smile, people will get confused. And so it hangs at home in my office. And so now I can't believe I'm going to show you the next picture. But it really is a picture of my mom and my sister and I doing deep belly laughs on a bed when we were on vacation in Florida. So here it is. So that's us. I know. So we would go into these fits, and sometimes they would be 20 minutes. And they would go on, and my dad would be right over by my mom going, Janet, take a breath. You know, he was always worried she was going to pass out or something. So my sister-in-law would come, and she joined the family, and she's kind of serious. And she would just look at us like, something's wrong with these people. They're laughing hysterically. And then my nieces, when they got a little older, too. So a good belly laugh, and really in the literature out there, a good belly laugh really helps you relieve that tension and feel better. So here's another, I'm just going to show a little bit of this. And so the use of humor in academia is helpful as well for student learning. Sometimes patients learn better when we use humor and we give them an example, kind of a funny example. So this is just a short video of Mrs. Tiffany visiting the elderly class.
I know. Mrs. Tiffany is one of the patients that I visit in the assisted living environment. She's doing so well. Look at her, no?
I don't think I have to do Richard Simmons today after that.
No, I think you're going to do just fine with all of this.
I used to do Jack LaLanne, but he's dead now. So.
Yeah, that his juicers didn't,
anymore.
Get him any further than the rest of us. Wow, are you feeling a little short of breath? It was a little.
I'm a little short of breath, and I think, my cankles are worse today.
Yeah, you know, interesting. But you're doing so good.
Do you have any Lasix on you?
Well, you already had your dose today. Remember, we had it in the little pill box, and you take care of this. You can't take extra. Okay. So
we can't?
No. You didn't. Yeah. So Mrs.
Maybe that
Tiffany.
ham last night. Maybe that's what.
Yeah, the sodium would kind of. Causes. So we'll probably have to get you off your feet and get your feet up in just a minute here. So, I've been working with Mrs. Tiffany for years with her and her family, and her daughter contacted me a couple weeks ago and said, "You are not going to believe this letter that Mom sent to me." And she said it was just so wonderful, and she wanted, she told me about it, and I said, I got these nursing students, and I think they'd like to hear that letter that Mrs. Tiffany wrote to her children. Would you be willing to share that with us?
I would love to.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit more light because, the nursing students, does she need more light, guys? Yeah. And why does she need more light?
Poor vision.
But why is her vision low? What's her eyes doing? Her diet? Yeah. So she just needs more. So we're going to give her a little bit of light
that would
here
be good.
so she can read. Yeah.
So we just went on to read it. Now this is another one of my, I did ask permission from the boys if I could use their picture. So again, when appropriate, it's good to use student nurse humor as well. And so I remember one of my first days of clinical, and we had learned to we had to do these bed baths, and we had these big towels we had to fold a certain way and put them in a garbage bag and pour this stuff on them. Anybody remember that? Those days? And I could not figure out how to fold that towel. I just could not figure it out. So I went about my business I had a patient that was in a coma, and I started to try to give him a bath and do the bed change, and I got him all wrapped up like a mummy. And I heard my instructor coming down the hall, and I'm like, oh no, I'm so in trouble. And so she came kind of walking up the hallway, and she came in, and she looked aghast. She's like, what have you done? And so I quickly said to her, well, as you can see, my patient's kind of tied up at the moment. And so she started laughing, and then she helped me get him untied. But that really was helpful, to throw in a little bit of humor. I didn't know what else to do at the time because I was mortified that I wasn't going to be able to get him undone. So the other thing that they talked about, huge, this was something that was over and over from the survey, perseverance and resiliency. Very important. Able to weather the storms, able to bounce back when you've had a bad day, able to look at things through a lens, able to pray about it. And also what's interesting, in the literature, there's a connection between board pass rates and resiliency. So they've done some studies where the higher your resiliency level is, the higher chance of you passing boards. So I thought that was really interesting too. So, you need this Perseverance Trail was actually in Juneau, Alaska, and it was 3 miles straight up. So we looked at it and we're like, oh my. But we did it, so. Okay, so which path are you going to choose? Will you choose a positive attitude, strive in the workplace, or will you choose that other path? That other path of negativity and stress. It's your choice. It's up to you. You can make that choice. Now, in closing, a few takeaway messages from the talk, and then we're going to move on to our to the posters. So, a couple things. I've got 4 different things that came from the nurses, the managers, and really from the literature. So, number 1, you cannot care for yourself or for others if you don't care for yourself. So you need to take care of yourself. You need to have your mind, body, and spirit cared for. You can't have those soul droughts. When we're a caring field, and it's exhausting sometimes. So we really need to be able to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. Second one, the environment does not control you. You choose your attitude and how you're going to respond to situations. I'm not going to promise you're never going to have a bad day. I'm not going to promise you're not going to have stress in your work, but it's a very rewarding job. And if you can go about it and choose how you react, you will have many, many, many good and rewarding days as a nurse. Third, keep your sense of humor. Don't get all mired in the seriousness of everything. So keep your sense of humor. And if you need to debrief with somebody, don't do it at the desk. Grab one of your friends or somebody, call on the phone to one of your coworkers if you're out in the home care environment, and talk to somebody else about the issue that has that same HIPAA compliance. Don't put it out on Facebook and talk about it, or you'll get in trouble, or you could get fired. So make sure you can talk about generalities like our student did about the wonderful calling. But keep your sense of humor. You want to keep that sense of humor. And lastly, you are a child of God. Care for others as Jesus cared for the least. Oh, one more saying here. Being a nurse isn't about grades. It's about being who we are. No book can teach you how to cry with a patient. No class can teach you how to tell their family members that their parents have died or are dying. No professor can teach you how to find dignity in giving someone a bed bath. A nurse is not about the pills or the charting. It's about being able to love people when they are at their weakest moments. Thank you. We'll let Beth give you directions.
Not much in the